You'd think nothing could surprise you after living alone for years out on a quiet 5-acre property surrounded by pine trees and silence. But nothing prepared me for the night I watched my HOA president crawl across my yard in the middle of a winter storm, trying to break into my storage shed like a raccoon with a grudge. And nothing prepared her for what happened next when she realized she'd walked straight into her own downfall. I still remember standing there staring at the screen, knowing this moment would change everything, knowing that tonight I wasn't the one trapped. She was. My name's Daniel Cole, 41 years old, botanist, researcher, professional recorder of boring details. I spend my days analyzing plant genetics, labeling jars, logging temperature fluctuations. Not exactly the kind of guy you picture in a showdown with an HOA tyrant. But the funny thing about being a scientist is you learn patience. You learn when to wait, when to observe, and when to strike only after the pattern reveals itself. And in my case, the pattern showed up wearing a beige cardigan, pearl earrings, and a permanent expression of disappointed authority. Her name was Linda Marwood, president of the Silver Oaks HOA for 8 years running. The kind of woman who could make you feel guilty about breathing too loudly. She knocked on my door 3 weeks after I moved into my grandfather's old house, just a modest white ranch home he'd owned long before the HOA was founded. Legally, I wasn't part of their little empire. Legally, they had zero authority over me. But Linda had never let legal limitations interfere with her personal sense of dominion. She showed up with a clipboard tucked under her arm like she was delivering medical results. Then she handed me a printed list of mandatory corrections for my property repaint. The shutters lower the fence by 6 inches, replace my mailbox, move the trash bins to the approved side, and my favorite, evaluation pending for an unregistered outbuilding. She meant my grandfather's tool shed. I read the list twice slowly while she smiled at me like she expected me to thank her for the opportunity to comply. When I finally said, "I'm not under the HOA," her smile cracked. Just slightly, like a windshield taking its first chip. She didn't argue, she just gave a tight nod and walked away. And I swear I heard her mutter something under her breath about people testing boundaries. I told myself it would end there. It didn't. A week later, I got a letter from the HOA's attorney, some guy named Rankin, claiming my fence violated neighborhood standards and that the shed posed a potential safety hazard. The letter demanded immediate compliance or legal action. So I responded the same way I solve everything with documentation. I mailed back copies of property deeds, county records exemption clauses, the whole binder. I expected an apology, maybe even a retraction. What I got instead was silence, and then neighbors whispering cars, slowing in front of my house, people snapping photos of my yard like it was some sort of exhibit in a museum of poor life choices. Someone created a Facebook group called Preserving Silver Oaks, and guess whose house was the star of the show? Mine. My shutters, my grass, my shed. All with captions like, "This affects property values." I didn't even use Facebook. I wanted to shrug it off, pretend it didn't get under my skin. But it did. Every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me. Every time I saw Linda walking a group around the neighborhood, I swore she angled them toward my house like a tour guide pointing out a cautionary tale. Still, I tried to be patient, calm, focused, because picking fights wasn't going to fix anything. It was the November HOA meeting that finally turned this into a full-blown war. A neighbor named Mark texted me someone had brought up a proposal to expand HOA boundaries for uniform community oversight. And when I walked into that meeting room, Linda stood at the front like a queen addressing her court. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. Every slide behind her showed my property outlined in red like a hostile territory on a battlefield map. She made it sound so reasonable, so necessary. One property out of compliance can reduce neighborhood cohesion. Standards exist for a reason. Consistency protects everyone. I waited, patient, composed. And when the board opened the floor, I stood up with my own folder of neatly organized documents. 10 minutes later, her entire proposal collapsed. The law wasn't on her side. The county wasn't on her side. The state wasn't on her side. She knew it, and everyone in the room knew it too. The vote wasn't even close. I walked out thinking that was the end of it, but she was waiting for me in the parking lot. Her voice was low-controlled, scarier than yelling. "You think you've won, Daniel," she said. "But I'll find something. Everyone violates something. And when I do, you'll wish you'd cooperated." I drove home with my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. And for the first time I felt that flicker of doubt. What if I really was making things worse? What if I should have just swapped the mailbox and kept the peace? What if all this documentation and logic meant nothing against someone who enjoyed conflict more than she enjoyed being right? For a few days I avoided thinking about it. I buried myself in work sorting seed samples and cataloging plant tissues until midnight. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. So I installed cameras, 4 of them, got a new reinforced lock on the shed, told myself it was precaution, not paranoia. That's what I kept telling myself right up until the night everything snapped into place. A blizzard had rolled in hard. Trees bent under the weight of the wind and snow blurred everything beyond 30 feet. The kind of storm that makes the whole world feel smaller, quieter. But inside my house, the soft hum of the security monitor felt steadying, familiar, like I finally had control again, until a beam of light flickered across the screen. At first it looked like an animal, something low to the ground moving through the snow, but then the light steadied, angled upward, and I saw the unmistakable silhouette of a person hunched against the wind, moving toward my shed. I leaned closer. The figure stopped, checked over their shoulder, then knelt in front of the lock with a set of tools. I whispered, "No way." "Linda." I couldn't see her face, but I recognized the coat, camel-colored fur-lined hood, the same one I'd seen her wear at every winter HOA meeting. There she was, the queen of regulations herself, picking the lock on my shed like a thief in a Christmas movie gone wrong. And here's the part I'm not proud of for a moment. I froze. Completely. My brain couldn't catch up, because this was insane, beyond anything I imagined she'd ever do. I actually whispered at the screen, "Are you serious right now?" She got the door open, slipped inside. And the moment she yanked it closed behind her, I remembered something very important about that shed. The door locked automatically from the outside, and inside without the internal release mechanism. She wasn't getting out. I should have called the sheriff right then. I know that. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there staring at the screen, heart-pounding, hands cold. And for the first time in 8 months, I felt powerful. Not cruel, not vengeful, just finally not helpless. I watched her flashlight beam shake inside the shed as she realized the inner storage room was secured with another lock. She was trapped in a tiny concrete entryway with no service, no exit, and no idea I was watching. Then the guilt hit. Should I help her? Was this too far? Should I open the door and pretend I never saw anything? But then, right then, something inside me snapped back into place. Every violation notice, every rumor, every sideways look, every time she tried to humiliate me publicly, every moment she treated me like a problem to be managed instead of a person with rights. And suddenly clarity. I clicked the intercom button connected to the shed. Linda Marwood. She screamed, dropped her flashlight. I swear I heard it hit her shoe. I said, calm as I could, "You're trespassing, breaking and entering, and everything you're doing is on camera." She yelled back, demanding I open the door, accusing me of trapping her, calling this illegal detainment. But I wasn't detaining her. She walked in, she closed the door, she locked herself inside. "I'll open it," I said, "when law enforcement arrives." Her voice broke, not in sadness, rage. She started bargaining next, then blaming, then threatening lawsuits, then crying. There was no consistency, just panic and ego unraveling in real time. I muted her, and I called the sheriff. It took nearly an hour for deputies to arrive. The storm was that bad, but when their headlights finally cut through the snow, I felt something I didn't expect: relief. Real physical relief, like someone had removed a weight from my chest. The deputies followed me to the shed. They saw the damaged lock, the tools she brought, the clear evidence of forced entry. I unlocked the door, stepped back, and watched Linda stumble out into the snow, wrapped in her own humiliation. Her face, God, I'll never forget it. Shock, fear, denial, betrayal. Like she couldn't comprehend how the universe had allowed this outcome. She opened her mouth to spin some story, maybe blame me again, but the deputy cut her off and began reading her Miranda rights. And suddenly, she wasn't the HOA president anymore. She was just a woman who'd gone too far. They asked if I wanted to press charges. Absolutely. After that, things moved fast. Statements, photos, evidence handoff. The deputies took her to the county holding facility, and by the time they drove away, the storm had quieted, like even the weather was tired of her nonsense. I went inside, shut the door, and just stood there. Not happy, not triumphant, just done. Completely done. She'd chosen every step that led her there, and now she was going to face the consequences. The HOA held an emergency meeting 2 nights later. I wasn't there, but apparently it was historic. People lined up to describe years of her bullying, her power plays, her abuse of authority. They voted her out unanimously, sent me a formal letter apologizing for the harassment and acknowledging that my property was never under their jurisdiction. It didn't fix everything. Some neighbors still looked at me like I'd done something scandalous. A couple even vandalized my mailbox. But those were minor annoyances, temporary. Noise compared to the silence I finally felt again. 3 weeks later, Linda accepted a plea deal, probation, community service restitution, and a restraining order that barred her from ever approaching me or my property again. That was the last time I heard her name spoken in Silver Oaks. Sometimes I sit on my porch at night, listening to the wind cut through the pines, thinking about how strange it is, the little lines people cross, the little lies they tell themselves about power and control, and how far they'll go before they finally hit a wall they can't push through. A wall called reality. And every time I replay that night, every time I picture her creeping across my snow-covered yard, I feel the same calm certainty. When someone decides your boundaries don't matter, it's your job to show them they do. And that's the whole lesson. Your boundaries are only as strong as your willingness to defend them.